person who's either in elected or appointed positions as we are, it might be helpful for us just to spend a little time reflecting on that, and maybe at the end of the meeting. So I just kind of give you a heads up on that. As we all know, we've been doing so well these virtual meetings that we are handling it electronically under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021. And if there's any public tuning in either by phone or video, please know that we are still interested in hearing comments. And I encourage members of the public to email us at public.info@metc.state.mn.us, and we will certainly channel those questions or comments to those that are appropriate. And given that we are going to continuing to do the process of roll calls for all of our actions, we couldn't handle this meeting without the great voice of Liz Sund. So, Liz, if you could take attendance by ensuring we have a quorum.
Yes. Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson.
Aye.
Barber.
Here.
Chambliss.
Here.
Cummings.
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Fredson.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Johnson. Johnson. Lee.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lindstrom. Lindstrom. Sterner. Vento.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Zurin.
I'm present.
Thank you. Chair Zelli.
Here. Great. I think there's a quorum. The first order of business is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion for approval?
This is so moved.
Thank you. A second?
Cummings second.
Thank you, Molly. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Liz, please call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Sterner. Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Zurin.
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. Motion carries. The next order of business is approval of the minutes of our May 13th, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. This is Atlas Ingebretson.
Thank you, Linnea. A second?
Cummings second.
Thank you, Molly. Any discussion? Hearing none. Liz, call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson.
Aye.
Barber.
Aye.
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
thank you. Lindstrom,
Aye.
Sterner, Bento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. That carries. The next order of business is the joint report of the Management, Community Development, Environment, and Transportation Committees. And Councilmember Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. This amendment incorporates changes to the 2019 operating budget reviewed and approved by the Community Development Committee on April 27th and reviewed and approved by the Management Committee on May 13th. The budget amendment proposes an increase of $8.3 million in expenses for 3 programs. These expenses will be funded by additional revenue of $2.5 million, reserve balances of $5.8 million, and has 3 parts. First, there is an increase of $188,000 for HRA expenses that came in slightly over the 2019 expenses and are offset by additional federal revenues. Second, there is an increase of $300,000 for additional pass-through grants to parks implementing agencies, which is offset by additional state revenue. And third, there is an increase of $7.8 million for additional livable communities grants, which is offset by increased use of reserves. Livable community grant programs have multi-year grant terms, and available funds are housed in reserve accounts. The LCA pass-through account saw higher than anticipated expenditures due to grantees seeking reimbursement at rates higher than historic levels. The motion is that the Metropolitan Council authorizes the 2019 unified budget as indicated in accordance with the attached table.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second by Lee.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any discussion? Questions? Hearing none. Liz, please call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Bento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. That motion carried. Next, it's the consent agenda. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda?
Lindstrom moves the consent agenda.
Wolf
Thank you.
seconds.
Thank you. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none? Oh, yes,
There's one.
please. Yes.
I was reviewing the information in the 2020-136 for consistency, and the language I think we need to add in the term streetlight for the method for doing the behavior inventory. It's much easier to do searches for that. And I think that helps with transparency.
Okay, so that could be a friendly amendment that we identify streetlight as a source of the data. Okay, unless there is a objection, we'll include that. Any additional discussion?
Chair, this is Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson.
Yes.
I'm just curious, is that the only source of data? Does that amendment impact it if it's not?
Emmett, are you, or do we have a staff person who can answer that question?
Hi, Chair. This is Joel Hudding. I am on.
Joel.
I can answer that question. So the only source of location-based services data that we are currently using is Streetlight. So I think adding Streetlight would be fine.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions about the consent or thoughts about the consent agenda? All right, we have a motion and a second. Liz, call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson, Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. That motion carries. So now we're on to reports of the standing committees. The Community Development Committee has reports on the consent agenda, as does the Environment Committee. The next report is from the Management Committee, Councilmember Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we get into the one business item we have on the agenda, I just wanted to provide the council with an update that we heard at our management committee meeting today on the results of our general obligation bond sale. In this year's bond sale, we once again received a top rating of AAA from Moody's and S&P. If you remember, at the beginning of the COVID issues, we were put under watch by S&P. So that was a good win for our team to keep our rating at that AAA level. Both rating agencies cited the Twin Cities strong and diverse economic base and the council's strong financial position and fiscal management and low overall debt burden as factors in the top rating. Today, we sold two separate bond issues comprising of $88.8 million in new money. The first bond issue, 2020A, was $8.8 million of general obligation park bonds sold at a true interest cost of 0.27% and has a term of 7 months. In total, there were two bidders winning the bid, with the winning bid going to JP Morgan Securities. The second bond offering was 2020B, $80 million of general obligation wastewater revenue bonds sold at a true interest cost of 1.65% and has terms of 20 years. Total of 8 bidders, with the winning bid going to Bank of America Merrill Lynch. All the sale results fell within the parameters of the resolution passed by the council on May 13th. The proceeds are to arrive on June 17th. We received this information at the management committee. I think it's a great thank you for our team, Rich Cope and Mary, and all of our other team on the finance department to be able to raise money in these times at very, very low interest rates. So it's a job well done by that team. The second item that we have is a business item 2020-140, Railroad Liability Insurance for North Star Operations. This business item seeks council operations to renew its railroad insurance effective 6/1/20 to 6/1/21 for North Star Commuter Rail, an amount not to exceed $2.9 million. Mr. Chair, the Council's Director of Risk Management, Phil Jasper, will provide additional information about this business item, and providing more context about how it fits in the Council's overall risk and insurance program. With that, I'll turn it over to Phil.
Thank you, Councilmember Ferguson. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. As mentioned, my name is Phil Walljasper. I'm the Director of Risk Management here at the Council. And today I'd like to provide some information, again, about the business item for the North Star Rail Insurance, but also how that fits in with our overall insurance and self-insurance programs that we have here at the Council. This would be a good opportunity to present that to the full Council so that you have a better understanding and the perspective as to the types of risks that we insure and self-insure. So with that, moving to slide 2, let me talk a little bit more about North Star Rail Insurance and the business item that's in front of you today. This is insurance that is contractually required in our joint use agreement with Burlington Northern. It provides coverage for losses related to North Star operations, protecting not only the Council, but also Burlington Northern, as well as the funding partners for the operation. Now, it's important to note that even though Burlington Northern isn't insured on the policy, this policy only provides coverage for them if it arises and is related to North Star operations. It does not cover just freight-only losses that may occur on the corridor. It's a rather large policy. It requires limits of insurance of $295 million per occurrence. And whenever you have insurance that gets up to that level, multiple insurance companies are needed to provide the full $295 million. So what we will do is present the programs to several different insurance companies. Each company will provide a layer of coverage that is stacked upon each other to form the $295 million. Now, at the management committee a couple of weeks ago, I did present that in detail, but I also pointed out to them some of the difficulties and challenges that we faced this year in the renewal, and I wanted to talk just a little bit about that. For the last 2.5, 3 years, the property and casualty market has really seen an increase in the rates that the insurance companies are requiring. North Star has been pretty much unaffected by that, though, because of it's a well-run operation. It has a very safe loss history, and it's the type of risk that underwriters want to partner with. So we have pretty much been unscathed by those rate increases over the last 3 years. However, over the last year or so, the insurance companies are not only increasing the rates, but they are also cutting capacity. And what I mean by that is an insurance company historically may have put up, say, $20 million in that tower that I talked about. The corporate mandate now for some of these insurance companies is that they want to recoup losses that they've seen elsewhere in their book of business, so they may only put up $5 million. So we knew going into this renewal for North Star that we would see not only a rate increase because the flexibility that insurance companies had to provide better rates for some entities, that has been taken away. But we also had about a $50 million gap in insurance in the full tower because of companies are either reducing their capacity or they're getting out of the market altogether. We're still building out that tower. I know the business item is to not exceed 2.9 million. We should have that zeroed in the next day or two. I can tell you just as of 30 minutes ago, I received an email that we will come in significantly less than the 2.9 million, but not knowing what the quotes were 2 weeks ago. That's why we had a level that gave us adequate protection for the authority. So North Star, this is one policy that we have. We have several different policies at the council, and that's depicted on the next slide, slide 3. So this gives a listing of all the different insurance policies that we maintain, and it's a rather busy slide, I understand that, but it does provide a snapshot of the different types of policies, which you'll see on the left-hand column, but then additional information about each policy that we have. I just want to talk briefly about some of the key policies that we have and some of the challenges that we'll see in the upcoming year. The third row down, the police professional, that's a policy that also over the years has seen increases in its premium because of what's happening across the country with some losses that insurance companies are having to pay out. Fortunately, similar to North Star, we have a very well-run operation, and we use that as much as we can to present this to the underwriters to put us in the best spot possible to get the best rate that we can. But it's something we continue to work on. It's something that we continue to partner with the underwriters and make sure they understand what kind of operation we have. But it is a policy that across the board has seen rate increases. The next policy and the next row down, the property insurance, That's, as you can see, in 2019, we paid a little over 1.9 million in premium. That policy expires in August of this year. So this year, we're fortunate because this will be the third and final renewal where we have a rate guarantee. When we switched to XL Insurance a couple years ago, we not only received a very favorable quote from them, but we were also able to lock into a rate guarantee for 3 years. We'll start marketing this program shortly after the new year, though, because this is going to be a challenge. If the market doesn't change significantly, what we will see, I'm anticipating, is anywhere from a 25 to maybe 75% increase in that premium. And it's nothing because of what we're doing in our operations. I'll say again that just like our police and with North Star, a big risk that we face with this policy is the flood coverage. And Environmental Services does an outstanding job of managing that. They work very closely with our insurance company, and it puts us in the best spot possible to get the best rate we can. But by design, as we know, wastewater treatment plants are located next to rivers, and it creates a flood exposure to us. So we'll start working hard on that next year, but we have one more year of this rate guarantee, which we're very fortunate. A couple rows down, cyber. Again, that's another one that's being driven by forces around the country. It's being driven by losses that insurance companies are seeing. And now with the COVID-19 that you may have seen in the papers, that there are more and more cyber attacks that companies are having to deal with. We have a lot going on to try to deal with that and manage that exposure within the council. And I think Matt Latour may talk a little bit about that in his presentation and the information item. But that's another one that continues to see rate increases. Although we're sitting in a pretty good spot. We have $3 million in coverage with $150,000 retention, and the premium last year was a little over, or this year was a little over $45,000. A little further down, the rail liability, that's the North Star program. But then the last three, the railroad protective and builder's risk, I'll start with those two. Those are programs that are relatively new for the council. Historically, those are policies that are provided by our contractors. We put those in place. We put a blanket program in place so that we get the policy for ourselves, and contractors are able to participate in that program for us. And we report those contractors to our carriers, our insurance carriers, every quarter. And it does a couple things for us. It allows us to get coverage certainty. We know exactly what kind of coverage we're getting with our construction projects. But it also allows other contractors that may not be able to get this type of insurance the ability to work with the council. MCUBs, DBEs, smaller contractors that may not have the leverage with their insurance company to get this coverage. We're able to get it because of the size of our program and the kind of leverage we have, and then we will allow them to participate in the program, breaking down some of those barriers. And the last one, our rail liabilities, that's with Southwest, with now the ownership of a rail corridor that has some exposures that come with that, and we have a policy that provides $30 million of coverage for that as well. So, Mr. Chair, that gives you an idea of the policies that we have. But the next slide, I want to spend some time talking about our self-insurance program. And we have quite a bit of risk that we self-insure. And when I say self-insure, that doesn't mean we're just accepting the risk without funding. We actually have accounts set up that we fund with the intent being that we have no unfunded liability related to these claims. But the types of claims that we self-insure are bus claims, bus accidents, injuries, no fault claims that come out of our bus operation. Those are types of claims that we would self-insure. And we also self-administer those as well. We have a staff within the risk department, very experienced, over 20 years experience on average. They know the statutes, they know the case law, and they handle those very, very well. Same with the light rail claims, property damage or injuries that arise out of our light rail operations. We self-insure and self-administer those in addition. The third bullet point, workers' compensation, that is obviously injuries to council employees while in the course and scope of their employment. We administer those claims within the risk department as well. And to put this in a little context, those first three bullet points, those claims, I can tell you on average for the light rail and bus, we see about 3,500 claims a year on average. And a bulk of those would be the small fender benders, no-fault claims, things like that. And on the work comp side, we have about 350 claims a year. In terms of the financials, the total incurred for those 3 bullet points, those types of claims, which would include everything we pay out, everything we reserve, plus the work comp expense that we would get reimbursed through the Special Compensation Fund, it's about $30 million. So it's not a small program. We have a very seasoned staff that handles those, and it's a very big cost savings for us to do that in-house. I thought I'd mention the 4th bullet point of public officials liability. That is something that we also self-insure. Granted, we have a lot of immunities, statutory immunities for decisions made by public bodies, but in the event we ever do see a claim for that, we have a funded account that would provide protection for those types of claims as well. And the last bullet point, claims within the insurance deductibles and retentions. I didn't mention this at the beginning when we talked about North Star, but I wanted to kind of bring this full circle back to the business item. That North Star policy that we have, the first $2 million of every loss is something that we have to retain. So the first $2 million, we would handle those claims and we would have to pay for that. It's a funded account that we have set up. But what's significant about that is the insurance company is typically when there's a large retention, the insurance company would require the insured on the policy to contract out with a third-party administrator to handle the claims. We have been able to work with the underwriters. We've been able to get them to agree to allow us to insure or to handle those claims. They have full confidence in the staff that we have and the experience and know that we're going to handle those the right way. In fact, on that second slide of all the insurance policies that we have others that have retentions and deductibles. We don't have a third-party administrator on any of those programs. It's something that we handle in-house. So that's a good example of how our self-insurance and what we have in place within the risk department works very closely with our insurance program. And it's particularly important on the North Star program. It puts us in the best position that we can to get the best rate that we can with the coverage that's required in our contracts. So Mr. Chair and council members, I would be happy to answer questions on our insurance or self-insurance programs. Or I could turn this back to Councilmember Ferguson for a motion on this specific business item and then be available for questions after that.
Sure, let's get a motion on the table. Thank you, Phil, for that very comprehensive report. Chris?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize renewing its railroad liability insurance effective June 1st, 2020 to June 1st, 2021 for North Star Rail operations an amount not to exceed $2.9 million.
Right. May I have a second?
Johnson seconds.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Well, Phil, that's a tall stack, 295. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And I was remarkable how that $2 million deductible, that's a great benefit and a tribute to your staff that you can not only handle that, but all the others. How many underwriters are involved in something of that size?
Mr. Chair and council members, we present to roughly 25 or 30 different insurance companies. For this renewal, we are looking at probably, if it plays out the way I think it's going to, we'll have about 16 different companies that will be a part of our program. Wow. Historically, it's been about 12 or 13, but this year's a little bit more because they're not offering as much.
Sure. Anybody else have a question, thoughts? Molly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question, it was back on slide 3 where we saw the chart of all the various kinds of coverage. I'm wondering the coverage on the, I think Greg's bringing it up there, the property insurance that covers damage to and replacement costs to LRVs and so forth. I'm wondering, I know we accepted a couple of new LRVs for the extension, and as we get more, as we anticipate getting more before this policy expires next summer, will this amount of coverage also cover any new LRVs that come into our possession?
Mr. Chair and council members, yes, it will. So with those types of programs, we work closely with the contractor and we have this defined in the contract as to when that risk becomes ours. I can tell you that our property program is a rather robust program. So regardless of what we had in place with the contract, it does allow coverage up to, I think it's $20 million of any newly acquired property, regardless of what kind of contract terms we have in place. So it does cover that. And every year what we do is we report the new values to our insurance company, and then that would have an impact on the premium that we charge. But yes, there is coverage, and it is coordinated with our contractor.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
They're nicely wrapped up in white plastics. We want to keep them safe. Any other questions, thoughts? Thanks, Phil. Well, I think we're ready for a vote then. Liz?
Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Sherzelli,
Aye. That motion carries. There's no report from the Transportation Committee, but next is a joint report of Environment and Community Development Committees. Councilmember Lilligren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Joint Committee report contains 3 items, and the following 3 business items are comprehensive plans for communities connected to the regional wastewater system, and they were all heard in Community Development and Environment Committees. For all the communities, council staff found that the 2040 plans conform to regional systems plans, are consistent with council policies, and are compatible with the plans of adjacent and affected jurisdictions. The first is business item 2020-130. It's the comprehensive plan of the Township of Empire, the 2040 comprehensive plan. Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached advisory comments and review record and take the following actions. The recommendations from the Community Development Committee are to authorize Empire Township to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, and also to advise the township to implement the advisory comments in the review record for wastewater, surface water management, and forecast. And the recommendation of the Environment Committee is to approve Empire Township's comprehensive sewer plan.
Great. Is there a second?
Wolf seconds.
Thank you. Any discussion? Liz, call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Sherzelli,
Aye. So that motion carried. Number 2.
Yeah, the next item, Mr. Chair, is business item 2020-131. It's the Prior Lake 2040 comprehensive plan and comprehensive sewer plan. Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached advisory comments and review record and take the following actions. Recommendations from the Community Development Committee are to authorize the City of Prior Lake to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect. Also to advise the city that prior to final plan adoption, the plan should be revised to include the TAZ information that was included in the supplemental information submitted to the council on February 5th, 2020, and also to implement the advisory comments in the review record for transportation and land use. And the recommendation from the Environment Committee is to approve the City of Prior Lake's comprehensive sewer plan and advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for wastewater.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second by Barber.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Liz, please call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Chairzelli,
Aye. That motion carries. And one more, Councilmember Lilligren.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. The final joint committees item is the business item 2020-132. It's to authorize the 2040 comprehensive plan for the city of Carver and approve their comprehensive sewer plan. Mr. Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council adopt the attached advisory comments and review record and take the following actions. Recommendations from the Community Development Committee are to authorize the city of Carver to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect. Also to advise the city to be fully consistent with the council's council's water resources policy plan. The local water management plan needs to include the responsibility schedule and funding source information for each implementation project and activity in the LBMP table 8.3. Also to provide the dates the two watersheds approved the final LWMP and the date that the city adopted the final LWMP. Also to provide a copy of the final adopted LWMP that will include in the plan document that the city adopts if it differs from the December 2018 version contained in the July 19th, 2019 plan submittal. Also, advise the city to implement advisory comments in the review record for surface water management, forecast, and water supply. And the recommendation from the Environment Committee is to approve the city of Carver's comprehensive sewer plan.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second by Barber.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. Liz, please call the roll.
Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Chairzelli,
Aye. That motion carried. Thank you. And now we're on to other business. Business item 2020-153 are my appointments to serve on a housing work group. And I'm appointing the following members to serve on it. Robert Lilligren, Chair, Reva Chambliss, Molly Cummings, and Judy Johnson. I want to speak to this a little bit and then maybe hear from the council member Lilligren. This is not obviously a new issue. It's something that is very important to all of us, very important to the council, and we're involved in housing issues in so many different ways. And I have to say, as I've been observing the issue for a number of years, it's not getting any simpler, and yet the crisis is getting more acute. And so we thought it'd be useful to have this group, in part, to provide a forum for council members to dig a little deeper and help kind of work with council staff on a number of areas, but including specifically strategies to help kind of implement our council's vision and our goals. Two, to kind of help guide the council's work in evaluating the effectiveness and the appropriateness of our Living Communities Act programs. Also, guiding the council's work in addressing homelessness, which has become has always been important and has always been an issue, but is looming larger, and in this COVID time, really been a bigger issue for us as the Met Council and many of our programs. And also kind of identifying any other emerging issues that we should consider. This advisory work group will help with, as I mentioned, LCA program evaluation, implementation, and actions that we may want to take on any of what I just described. So it's a pretty broad kind of scope. I should point out, and importantly, this is not a decision-making group. It's not a formal committee which is empowered to act. It will simply maybe help vet and make recommendations, and for us to kind of, as a full council, to or the appropriate committees to consider. By the end of the year, we would expect a kind of formal report and recommendations to the Community Development Committee and the full council on the following items. One, progress on the implementation of strategies identified in our council's housing goals. Two, the evaluation of Livable Communities Act programs for consideration in our 2021 fund distribution plan. A report on the emerging housing issues and recommendations for what action steps we should consider. And then evaluate and make recommendations for continuation of the housing working group if there's relevance and impact for continuing it. So that would probably be in December of this year. So that's kind of a broad overview. Councilmember Lilligren, do you want to make any additional comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just really briefly, so thanks for bringing this forward. I want to thank my council colleagues in advance for supporting the creation of this work group. I just want to note that this group is actually a subset of the Community Development Committee with sort of strategic direction through this term that we've continued to gain more technical expertise. I expect some of the work of this group to be very, very technical. And so through the selection process, we had to start with who could actually serve on a work group together from the Community Development Committee, which was very, very limiting. And especially because of so many of us served on the Audit Committee. And so it came down to a very small subset. So I want to thank my colleagues, Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember Cummings, Councilmember Chambliss, and just note that sort of the record of our work will come to the Community Development Committee and then enter the council process. And I also want to emphasize the evaluation part. And so we'll see if this is working, if it's working in this form, if there needs to be changes or modifications to how we do the work. I look forward to getting to this work. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember. Any questions or thoughts on that? You know, I'd entertain a motion to appoint these recommendations.
Chair Zeli, this is Sue Vento. I move approval of these appointments.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Johnson seconds.
Thank you. Okay, so this is a big issue, so we can't expect a full conversation. We understand that. And we're going to hear more. Any other questions about kind of forming this group? No, okay, so, yeah.
Mr. Chair, this is Sue Vento. I would ask the group in your conversations to include housing issues related to aging residents in our 7-county metro area. Housing was quite a discussion this morning on the council's the Council for an Age-Friendly Minnesota meeting, each of the state agencies reported, and housing repeatedly came up in the reports, is a crucial issue for our aging population. So thank you. I'll look forward to hearing more.
Great. Riva?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm honored to be appointed and to serve, and I'm looking forward to addressing a variety of housing issues. And you said it so well in terms of why we're forming this and the importance of it, especially the hit that our economy has taken recently with our pandemic. So thank you.
Well, and thank you for their comments. And I must say, we could continue to talk about it. But when we think about housing, we can't think about that without thinking about financial stability, marginalization of people. It's a host of issues, and I think that's what makes our work so important. We're ready to vote. Liz, can you call the roll?
Atlas Ingebretson,
Aye.
Barber,
Aye.
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zurin,
Aye.
Chair Zelli.
Aye. Thank you. That motion carried. Our final item, business item today, is information on their audit annual report. And Matt Latour, I know you're here. Welcome, Matt, and thank you for presenting to us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. Can you just verify you hear me okay?
Yep, you're coming in great.
Thank you. Thanks, and I appreciate you having me today. I have three purposes really for the presentation. The first is to introduce our audit function, and that is our audit committee and our audit team, and talk a little bit about the role that we play within the council. Second will be focusing a little bit specifically on the risk management piece that the audit team plays in the audit committee within the council. And then three, talking about our audit report, which was sent around to council members last Friday. This is actually a first for the audit department, something we put into our new audit charter. I think just to make sure that we're communicating to the full council more frequently, at least on an annual basis, about the activities that we're doing, to give you a flavor of the type of work we're doing and our risk management activities. So a version of this was presented to the audit committee last week, and they approved the content. Greg, do you have my slides up? I actually can't see.
They're just going up. There
we go. Okay, if you could go to slide 2. So our audit committee is an advisory committee of the council. The purpose in large terms is to provide structured systematic oversight of the council's governance, risk management, and internal control practices. The committee is made up of 4 council members: Chair Judy Johnson, Vice Chair Chai Lee, Councilmember Barber, and Councilmember Vento. And I should recognize that Councilmember Ferguson played a role until in the first year. And then we select 4 members of the community, and these members are selected when this council came in, along with Chair Johnson and Councilmember Sterner. We selected members based on an application process to get sort of representative sample of private and public business across the region, diversity, variety of ages. A number of criteria went into the selection. I think we got a very robust membership. First, Amy Jorgensen, who is the controls manager at the Minnesota Management and Budget, the state agency. Andra Rothler, who is the audit director at Hennepin County. Quinn Galswick, who's an audit manager at the University of Minnesota, and Gracie George, who works for U.S. Bank Audit Department. They've been a very vocal and wonderful addition to the council, asking a lot of good questions, pressing us, and giving us great advice. This committee meets about 4 times a year, something like quarterly, but that's not exactly the meetings sort of go around the state auditor schedule. And it's staffed by myself and Tammy Ryan, the audit coordinator. So next slide. So our internal audit department, I am the chief audit executive, also known as the director. There are 7 full-time auditors, 3 interns, and our audit coordinator. I've been the director of the department for about 2 years, and I've been with the department for 5. Most of our full-time staff have master's degrees, a lot of Humphrey graduates in our ranks. And I should just note that we use our interns as really a part of our staff. They're typically graduate students. They work with us all year round, pretty close to full time, except for just in the heat of the school year. And we are just finishing up a group, Aaron, Drew, and Caitlin, in the next couple of weeks, and we'll have a new group starting June 8th. The next slide. So I just put up the council's org chart here to show you where we sit within the organization. And you'll see me just to the far right, reporting directly to actually you, the council. This is set up this way intentionally to give us organizational independence, which is something that is a standard set by the Institute of Internal Auditors as a way of ensuring that we are able to provide clear and functional oversight to the organization. So I report functionally to the chair, the council, the audit committee, the board specifically. And administratively, I report to Meredith, the regional administrator. So we function really as a department within RA. Our budget, our travel, our administration is all handled as a sort of an internal function. But we have that direct line to the board as a way of allowing us that independence to critique and provide recommendations to management with independence and without fear of reprisal. So next slide. So we have our policy framework is set up in 3 documents. The audit policy came to the council last year. It's a relatively thin document that just establishes the need for an audit department. And we also have an audit committee charter that is also approved by the council and gives the audit committee their authority to oversee the audit department. And then the audit department charter, which gives us direction. It does things like ensures that we have access to all documents, sets up our independence, spells out the functions of our department. That's approved by the audit committee, and we usually bring that about every year just for reapproval. All of these documents were most recently approved in 2019. So the mission statement, and this is based largely on, again, the IIA, Institute of Internal Auditors mission statement for all audit shops, is to enhance and protect organizational value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. And I think the key statement I always take here is that protect organizational value. I think sometimes auditors have this reputation of being compliance police, and I don't really think of us that way. I think of us as trying to work with management to improve and to best meet our objectives as an organization by really being insightful and providing those good and positive recommendations, and also pointing out when we're doing well. So the next slide. The audit committee. So I'll read the what's in charter, which is to, as I mentioned before, the structured systematic oversight, things like oversight of governance structure, risk management, values and ethics, internal control framework, oversight of the audit, and the financial statements and public reporting. In practice, what the audit committee really does, not that the committee doesn't focus on those topics, but the way it does this in practice is to approve the charter every year for the department, approve the annual audit plan for the audit department, listen and hear and provide feedback to the results of both internal audits and external audits, have the entrance and exit conference from a board level with the state auditor, provide general oversight and feedback to the audit department and our audit staff. And also a key point here is to be consulted on the oversight of my position. So the hiring, firing, compensation, having that extra eye on over the chief audit executive to ensure that that the position is treated fairly. And that's just, I don't think we have any reason for concern at the council, but in audit functions, it's always important to make sure that if an audit chief is let go, that it's not because of something that that person found that management didn't like, that it's for cause or for poor performance. So the next slide. So what do we do in internal audit? Generally speaking, conduct audits and consultations over internal controls. So an internal control is a process affected by an entity's board, management, and other personnel designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of objectives. So again, in practice, what that really means is things like having proper forms, having signatures, management approval, generating reports that provide oversight, ensuring segregation of duties. So we focus a lot on the internal machinations of the organization to make sure that what I like to say is, in general, what we say we do, we are actually doing. So when we say we're trying to do business processes, is the result actually that business process or something else? And I will talk a little bit about it in a minute when we get to the risk part, about how we select our audits and our annual plan. So we also coordinate and track external audits and oversight reviews. We play a role with the state auditor and any other external entity that reviews us from periodically. So the Federal Transit Administration, obviously we receive a large sum of dollars from the FTA, and they come at least every 3 years for what's called the triennial review. But they also periodically select the council for things like financial management oversight reviews or procurement reviews. So we help coordinate those and track findings and ensure that we're meeting their needs. We also evaluate governance, risk management, and control processes. But this is kind of a more general, just oversight and consulting role. And we coordinate and conduct investigations related to fraud, data practices, and other topics as needed. So next slide. So the next few slides, we're getting a little bit more into our role with regard to risk management. So, I mentioned we have an audit plan every year. To get to that plan, we conduct an annual risk assessment. And I say annual, but really this is an ongoing risk assessment of the council. And it's broken into a few parts. So the first part is the control environment assessment. And we use the state of Minnesota's tool for this. It's called the CSAT tool. It's required of state agencies, although because we're not a state agency, we're not required to. But audit uses this as a framework for looking at this general tone from the top of the organization. So there's the tool has 18 goals and lists 90 questions. To give you a flavor of the types of things that we focus on here, policies and procedures, making sure those are updated from the council level, cross-training in place to make sure that single points of failure, in other words, if there's one person in the organization that can do or knows how to do one job, to make sure that there's cross-training in place. So if that person leaves, that it's covered. Things like cybersecurity, making sure that our controls are set up in terms of cybersecurity. Our risk assessment process, we do a more formal structured part of it in the fall. We do semi-structured interviews with directors and managers across all divisions. Usually that's about 50 to 60 meetings. It takes a significant amount of time, but we discuss all sorts of risk-related topics during those meetings to help inform what ultimately becomes our risk register, which is a matrix that we use to assess potential business objectives. We look at financial impacts, external factors, IT factors, any recent changes to that business process or management in that business, and time since last audit coverage, and that could be either internal or external. We also consider when we put together our risk assessment, whether we have large or small external audits coming in. Okay, so from that assessment, we develop our risk-based annual audit plan. It's a list of internal audits and consultations activities for the current year and the external audits that are planned to be scheduled by these various entities. We also include on that plan other activities, peer reviews, which I'll get to in a minute. Things like this year, we have our strategic plan for our audit department that we're putting together that will take some time. Trainings we want to do for either our team or for the other members of the council. and any other events that might take up significant time. We usually in this plan also leave about 25% of our time for unforeseen activities, which tend to take up more than 25% of time most years. I call this an annual audit plan, but really the industry and we are moving towards updating this document really more frequently and on a rolling basis. I think most audit committee meetings in the last year, we've actually done at least a minor update to the plan, and we try to adapt to what's going on. This year is certainly no exception with so many changes due to COVID. We've been doing some subsequent analysis of how COVID has affected many of our operations, and in response, we've added a few items to our plan, and there's others that are probably not as ripe for audit now that circumstances have changed. So we either are, sort of phasing out of those audits or moving them down the priority list. So just a little bit about our internal audit process. So once we select an engagement and begin the audit, we actually do an engagement level risk assessment. So this is a more detailed process. So taking a look at an individual, say payroll, as an example that we have on our audit plan right now, and looking at the various controls that are in place, so supervisory reviews, segregation of duties, et cetera. And we use that as a way of triaging among, the topic payroll, what would be the most important areas for us to focus on. We identify those and we execute a testing plan that we devise based on that engagement level risk assessment. And then once we've finished with that testing, we identify potential recommendations. We discuss with management. We ask them to agree or disagree, and we get a management response of a corrective action that will take place. And then typically we bring the results of all of that in an audit report to the audit committee. So next slide. So once we've issued that report, we continue to track those issues. We look at internal audit recommendations. We look at the corrective actions. And if needed, we'll retest to make sure that the control is now effective and is working as intended. One thing we're working on right now in our team is a new audit database, which will be a repository for all audit findings, whether they be internal or external, that'll allow us to do better reporting on audit follow-up and audit corrective actions. One thing that I think we could do better with our audit committee is report back on results of past audits, and this will be a way to do on a regular basis, provide the results of those corrective actions by management. Right to the next. So some other activities that we do, we have a role in fraud. As I mentioned, we do some investigations. One example, I know Phil mentioned in his presentation related to cybersecurity this year. We did an investigation, or coordinated really an investigation using our cybersecurity insurance policy, where we had there was a data breach, and we used a forensic investigator to identify what information had been lost and try to get a sense of how that information was lost. So we have a range of investigative work that we do, in both leading and also consulting on investigations. Same topic, we are working right now on a new tool that council staff will be able to use for reporting potential fraud, waste, abuse, or employment actions. Things like sexual harassment, things like respectful workplace violations. So this will enhance our capability for receiving those complaints, utilize a 24/7 hotline and also an online capability that will, for the first time, allow somebody to not only submit a complaint electronically, anonymously, but allow those responsible for investigating and communicate back with that person. Another activity we do, we try to enhance council knowledge of risk through trainings. Last year, we coordinated training related to cybersecurity. We worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office to bring in experts from across the federal spectrum to discuss cybersecurity risk for infrastructure. We also brought in a trainer to look at new methods for risk assessment, and we invited a number of council managers to attend along with our team. And I regularly am a part of the new manager orientation to discuss fraud risk at the council. Governance, one large project we're always looking at governance and decision making across the council. One big project we had in this vein in the last couple of years was a technology governance. We had a third party come in and review and recommend technology governance strategy. So we managed that contract and helped facilitate that work and continue to monitor the execution. All right, so next slide. So this is getting back into the contents of the report, and I'll move through this relatively quickly. The report provided some color of what the audit accomplishments for the past year. As you can see, we finished about 60% of our projects. As I mentioned, the audit committee, it's probably short of where we would have liked to have been. However, we always set our audit committee or our audit plan at a fairly ambitious level. We always want to make sure we have enough projects in our queue in case some fall off or that we move faster than we need to. So I think it was we achieved quite a bit within the year. Some projects kicked into this year's audit plan, including work related to fare enforcement, bus operator hiring, and Southwest Light Rail construction, and technology asset management. So we're still working on those and anticipate having results sometime this year. One other thing of note is we had a lot of investigative work last year that we spent a lot of time on, so that impacted our ability to execute the audit plan. Next slide. So of note, last year we completed a peer review. We're required to meet our IA standards to have a peer review every 5 years. We chose the self-assessment with independent validation. So we actually completed the assessment of ourselves and had 2 audit staff from Health Partners come in and review our assessment. And largely they agreed with the work we did, but had some helpful insights as well. We took the results of those, although we generally conformed with virtually all of the standards, we took some of the partially conforms and generated some self-recommendations for us to improve over the next few years. So that's our audit process improvement plan. Among accomplishments in the last year, we developed a new checklist for staff to comply with IA guidance and worked a lot of that in, baked it into the cake, if you will. We continue to improve and better document our risk assessment planning process. That's been every year we've taken a new stab at improving. It improved our internal documentation in a number of areas. Back to the point I made about policies and procedures, certainly something we're focused on as well. And we had a lot of outdated policies and procedures, work instructions, so we've been updating those as we go. Things we're looking for in 2020. I mentioned the audit database. We're looking at our product line to see if we can communicate our results better, maybe some new types of products, and continue to improve our workflow with handling complaints and investigations. So the next slide, just listing a few audits that we did here. We worked on some purchasing card work, liquid waste haulers, FTA compliance. We do a lot of work with our subrecipients and contractors to ensure they're meeting FTA requirements and reporting back to the MTS staff. Next slide, cybersecurity, and then a range of consulting. And this kind of gets at the 25% topics that come up, things like prevailing wage, grant management, contract management, et cetera. The next slide is just repeating about the cyber threats. This is the training we did for the council. And the final slide I have is just looking ahead again. And I mentioned a couple of these are carryover audits from last year, and a lot of repeat from what I've already said. But one thing we'll be preparing for is the next triennial review would play a significant role when the FTA comes and coordinating all the activity around their hundreds of documents they request in their 3-day site visit. So that's all I have for today, but I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Matt. That is you have a full plate. That's really impressive. Do you think that given we were a recipient of substantial amount of funds due to the CARES Act, is the FDA so overwhelmed, or are they coming in to say, I just spend it. I mean, do you expect some more scrutiny from external sources this year because of the COVID time?
I'll say it this way. I think we should be prepared for that. I don't know if that'll come. I know the CARES Act was written in a way it seemed as though they were loosening strings even more so just to get the money out the door and spent. But that doesn't mean it all has to adhere to federal procurement regulations. It all has to be spent. 2 CFR 200 is the common grant rule that we always focus on. So it is a topic that we're going to work on in the coming months. I know that Marie Henderson, Mary Bogie, that whole group has had their eyes on this from day one and has been focused on it. But we're certainly, it's on our audit plan now. It's something we added during the year in response. It's such an important topic.
Right. Any questions? Councilmember Lindstrom?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, how often do we see fraud in the council? Is it an internal fraud situation? Is it once a year, like to a criminal level? Is it once every decade? Is it regular? I don't anticipate that it's very regular, but I'm just kind of curious.
It's probably
it's not.
Mr. Chair, Councilman Lindstrom, it's probably between the once a decade and once a year. It happens, and we certainly, we consider filing a false claim for a piece of equipment as fraud. I mean, it can be sometimes, what seems like a really small amount of money, but it's still fraud. And $1 of government funds is fraud, and it's criminal. So I'll say that the reason why we wanted to, I get this question actually at new manager orientation quite a bit. And one of the reasons we've been wanting to do this new system to allow for easy filing complaints is that it's something like, you pick your number, but it's something like 50 to 70% of fraud is reported by employees. So, and we haven't had the best tools in place for employees to report these things. So, I hopefully I'll have a better answer for you once we get this implemented and we're able to track these complaints in a better way. But it exists, but I don't think I would say that it's rampant. I think we do a good job, and our staff are very diligent about keeping their eye out for fraud.
Great. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just really want to heap some praise on Matt and his whole team coming on board last year as the chair of this committee, and for the council members that serve on the committee. I was really struck by what Matt brings to this role. We are really stepping up our game at the council when it comes to audit. You've heard a lot about it here in this presentation, but it's so important because we're a big organization. We deserve the scrutiny and in return, the transparency that we owe the taxpayers and other levels of government. And I just couldn't be more pleased to have Matt leading this effort because he's doing a great job. And I would say, in a way, reforming and stepping up how we manage the audit division. I would also say his team is great, and those interns are amazing. They're right there with everybody else performing the level of duty that any employee would provide. And so it was a joy for us to say thank you to them as they move on to their next adventure from when we had our last audit committee meeting. I would also say I really appreciate Matt stepping up as a leader on the COVID management team. He's got another hat that he's wearing right now. So he's been, just like everybody at the council, stepping up in many ways to help us get through this difficult time and doing it with great talent and honor, and I appreciate that. And I really enjoy serving on this committee because you learn a lot. It's like looking under the hood. You get to see what's going on with the subrecipients. You get to see how the different divisions are managing the issues that are coming before them. And Matt has, let the committee know, which they're amazing too, our public sector, or I should say our citizens who serve on the committee. They brought great insights. But Matt is really making sure that we're the third line of defense. So, we really want to make sure that everybody throughout the council is trained up and bringing their best ideas and eyeballs on everything that we're doing so that we're catching things early and being as proactive and preventative in the work to make sure that everything runs the way it should be. So thanks to Matt and his team.
Well, and thank you, Judy. And I would actually echo, and I see Councilmember Vento did as well, of your great work, but also want to thank the committee and thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for your work, but others, you know, and when I think about governance, and I've had that experience in the private sector and the public sector, there's a reason why the auditor reports to us as council members. This is a board function. This is the whole idea of having independence, where the cadence of accountability starts with us, and it's important work that we need to be taking and do take seriously to help support the integrity of this organization. So it's and when you think about you know, you think about your question, Councilman Lindstrom, have there been evidence of wrongdoing? I'm sure there's evidence of that, all, you know, small or big, but you know, ask Wells Fargo whether they think about independent directors. You know, we actually have to have our eyes open. And I did notice in our previous presentation on council member liability, you know, a few people sitting up looking at that. Well, you know, this is, you know, we come to meetings, but we also have a really important responsibility, and part of that is our fiduciary responsibility and ensuring that. And so it's really great to know, Matt, you've got this systems in place that 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 is pretty thorough. Any other questions, thoughts? Well, thank you, Matt, for the presentation. I think that again, we've covered a lot of ground with a big with an overview, but it's we look forward to hearing more later in the year about some of your projects.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
That kind of ends our business items. I did say at the start of the meeting, and that we have a comment period now. And I just want to at least acknowledge that the untimely, tragic, and inexplicable death of George Floyd has just kind of made it really poignant for a lot of our work and our roles, again, as public figures, but also where we have equity as one of our pillars of our visions in our work, and yet it should be engaged in everything we do. We talk about it, but we as a Minnesota haven't made the progress, and so it's just so sad at so many levels. And I think for those of us who care about this state can find this intolerable. But I think that I've heard a lot of people speak in the past 24 hours, including the mayor and the governor today, and I kind of support, you know, them calling for accountability and justice. But I think that this is going to be a marathon, but we need to step up our marathon shoes and start not just thinking about the words, but maybe some measurable actions. So I think this is something we need to think about what we're doing in the weeks, months, and years ahead that are kind of right in our zone, and I think about our attempts at inclusion. It's going to be at so many different levels, but maybe it just starts with us personally. I just find it so shocking that you could have racism that is not just overt as it was to see it, but also how it's everywhere in a covert way that it kind of allows it. So I think we're all kind of numb, and I'm not expecting any resolution. I just thought we ought to say it out loud. I don't know if anybody else has a comment or wishes to address it or about anything, really.
This Councilmember Chambliss, I really appreciate you bringing it up. You know, waking up in the morning and hearing the news, I think it put a lot of people in a state of grieving, a state of trauma. It's very traumatic to even secondhand experience seeing something like that happen to another human being. And as one who, likes to think about, human rights and also looking at what we can do to preserve and protect those rights in an effective and proactive way. This is not something that I have woken up to in, many years, and it seems to be escalating. So it's something that needs to be dealt with.
Right. Thank you. Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And when I heard about this 48 hours ago or less, it's just beyond terrible. I know all of our hearts go out to the family of George Floyd, and I echo your call for justice. Mr. Chair, I think about our own internal operations, not just around the broad role we have around inclusion and equity, but kind of drilling down into our own police department. Keep in mind, folks, we have one of the largest police departments in the state. We have 120 officers full-time, something like 60 part-time officers. And we should be asking ourselves if we're doing everything we can to ensure that we're minimizing the chances that this could happen in our own department. And what I mean by that is, are we doing all we can to build trust and legitimacy in the community? Are we doing everything we can policy-wise? And do we have the oversight in place in our own department today? Do our officers does our department have the technology that they need? Are they implementing the best practices around community policing and crime prevention? Do they get the training, the education that they need? Do they have everything they need around officer wellness and safety? And I'm the first one to admit that maybe the answer is yes. I'm not on the transportation committee, so I'm not privy to all of their discussions around Metro Transit Police. But I think we ought to dive deep into that and not just make sure that we're not reactive. Just like be absolutely positive that we're doing everything we possibly can. Because, Mr. Chair, when Castile was shot in my city, I had so many mayors coming after me, coming to me and saying things like, "There but the grace of God go I," that this could happen in my city. And so that's how I'm feeling right now. I just want to make sure we're doing everything that we possibly can to minimize the chances. I know we probably can't eliminate it 100%, but just minimize the chances that our own department could be in this position 6 months from now, 5 minutes from now, or 5 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair,
Please, Molly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So hard to talk about. I echo Councilmember Lindstrom's comments, and I think it would be really helpful to hear an update from our police department on what they do, what they're doing, how they're doing it, how this changes their perspective. Hopefully there is change that comes from this. And we keep talking. I mean, the talking is endless and the putting words on paper is endless, but we need to act. I think we need to be sure that we're implementing the change that we want to see, the policies that are going to change the outcome that we say that we want to see. And I think we need to pursue it aggressively. This just cannot continue to happen. And I remember, Councilmember Lindstrom, when you went through your situation and the conversation over and over is this can happen anywhere, anytime, to anyone, and that's not okay. And I have to stop, but I hope that we can get an update as well and consider and ask, what can we do? What can we be doing differently? How can we change outcomes and not just talk about it? Not that we are just talking about it, but what can we do?
Thank you, Councilmember Cummings. I'm going to read a chat line so it's in the record, which I really respect, from Councilmember Vento, who, and that's part of my job as chair, is to read, but she said I cannot comment without crying, so I'll refrain. I pray that we can, as a Twin Cities community, to have the tough discussion that must occur. I'm reminded of the Irish proverb, "It is in the shelter of each other that people live." Our current shelter as a community feels so unsafe, inequitable, and cruel for too many. We must, we can, we will have the courage and integrity to lead, to act, to change, and to improve. And she, of course, supports Councilmember Lindstrom's idea, and yours as well, Councilmember Cummings, of that we would like to hear how we act, including that we have a police force and we're on the ground in many places on these issues. Anybody else here? Fred, Councilmember.
Thank you. Look, I think like all of us, I mean, I'm pissed. I joined the peaceful protest at 38th in Chicago yesterday to show solidarity with the family, with the community. It was surreal. It was sad. It was not, I got to be honest, like it's not a shock anymore to have to wear a mask there yesterday was, I felt like it was symbolic of people's voices not being heard. And I'm just concerned. I'm concerned about what this means for the community. I'm also concerned about what it means for us. And I know this is not about us, but I'm concerned about what it means about us. And this winter, I went out with the Metro Transit Police on an overnight ride-along and spent 6 or 8 hours, whatever it was, with, I feel, 3 really good people who got into policing for the right reasons and doing heroic work. And when I was, we were talking and they referenced like a pre and post Ferguson, right? Doing their jobs and the respect that they felt like they had from the community versus what it's felt like since. And now I feel like here, there is going to be a pre and post George Floyd. And I'm concerned about what this means in terms of our police department's ability to recruit good candidates, which we need. I'm concerned about what it means for them to be able to earn trust in the community. And most importantly, I'm concerned about what this means for their ability to do their job safely. And I believe that the Minneapolis Police Department has a culture problem. And it may not be limited to the Minneapolis Police Department. And I think others are speaking to that tonight. And so we have got to look in the mirror Our police chief and our management and our police officers need to look in the mirror. I believe this is a call to action for police officers across the state. And I guess speaking as a Met Council member, for every single Metro Transit police officer to look in the mirror, rank and file officers, saying it is time for us to take responsibility for our own actions and our peers' actions and our management and our union leadership. And I just pray to God, well, first of all, I'm in a questioning place as it relates to our partnership with the Minneapolis Police Department. So I applaud the mayor and the Minneapolis Police Chief for taking decisive action. At the same time, if you watched what played out last night as far as those protests and the amount of resources that we spend on military tactics, the amount of resources we spend on tear gas and rubber bullets, if we invested that same amount of resources in the community would be better off. So I'm pissed. I'm questioning the Minneapolis Police Department. And I sure hope that our chief and our officers know that we would have zero tolerance for the behavior that led to this, and also, frankly, the response to it that played out last night, or at least that's where I'm at.
Right. Thank you. Councilmember Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And
then Barber.
And thanks to all the council members who spoke before. And Chair, I want to thank you for giving us this moment to sit in our own feelings. It's been a heavy 2 days. And if you are not friends with the St. Paul Police Chief, Todd Axel on Facebook, you should go see his post. I don't know if it's public or private, but I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he wrote a very thoughtful reflection piece and alluding to what the last two council members said. He said in his post that he asked all St. Paul police officers to look at the video and also search their souls too. And so I'm going to see how we could never, how we should never repeat that here in St. Paul, in the St. Paul Police Force. And so I want to point that out to folks who might be interested in seeing what St. Paul Police Chief Todd Axel said on his Facebook. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Deb Barber, did you raise your hand? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for your comments. I mean, this is hard stuff to talk about, and but I really appreciate the heartfelt thoughts that are going out. As far as conversations with our police force, one of the things for all of you as new council members, we typically would have a committee of the whole or something like that with the police chief. Because we hired the new police chief in the summer last year, not often, like that committee of the whole would often be June, July kind of timeframe. But because Chief Frizzell was just coming on, we didn't have that session last year. And I think that this would be a good opportunity to have the chief come in and report on what's been going on, even maybe address some of the changes that they've seen during COVID, address how this impacts their policing, give you all an opportunity to ask some of the questions about the training and the interactions. I think, he's got a year under his belt, so it's a good time to bring him forward. So I'm happy. I'll reach out to Wes and see if we can get something coordinated.
Thank you. I think we'd like that. Wendy. You're on mute.
Linnea put in the chat that she would like to speak. I would like to speak also, but I would want Linnea to have the chance if that's what she was trying to do. I don't know if you could see her or not.
No, unfortunately, I missed it, but thank you. Yes. Well, right after you, Linnea there.
Oh. Okay, so I want to make sure I watched the video and it is horrific. It's horrible. But I want to make sure that people don't paint a broad brush on all police officers. As many of you know, my husband is a disabled police officer. He was Minneapolis Police Department, and he lost count of how many times he was shot at because it was that common. People called him horrible names. He was
at the time he got hurt, the highest ranking Asian officer in the department. But people would call him all sorts of horrible names and stereotype him as both as a cop and as an Asian person. And as I'm listening to this, where you're saying, well, all cops are whatever, and Minneapolis police has a terrible culture. Nobody ever hears the other side of the culture in the Minneapolis Police Department. When my husband got hurt, they told everybody not to talk to us. People were calling from all over the country trying to help my family. I was on the phone crying and begging for them to take messages and let us know the support that was out there because we needed it. We were financially destroyed by my husband's injury, and nobody has ever said they're sorry for what happened to us. And I mean, I've tried to talk to Jacob Fry, but I'm not worth a meeting. And people don't hear about that side of the accountability thing. And so don't paint a broad brush at all cops are terrible. I don't know Derek Chauvin. I do know his wife, Kelly, and she is very prominent in the Hmong community, and she has now had to go into hiding because people showed up at their house last night to try to attack their family. So there's more to this. There are cops all over the metro that are being abused because of what one cop did. And doing that sort of thing is just as bad as saying all whatever sort of people, black people, white people, whatever. This was a horrific thing that happened by a few people. That doesn't mean that everybody else is complicit with what they're doing. It doesn't mean that there's never any accountability. And I'm trying to step back and just let things play out, find out how all of this plays out. They're already talking about criminal charges. They've been fired. Let's find out more about what's going on rather than paint a broad brush at how everybody's so terrible, because that attitude that everybody's so terrible is why people have been able to get away with abusing my husband for the past 15 years. And that has to stop too. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Linnea?
First, I want to say, Wendy, I'm really sorry for what happened to your husband and your family. Second, I want to say, by virtue of being Black, your body is systematically worth less. It's considered the other. It is invisible. It is not for you to decide what happens to you or what does not. It's for others to weaponize against you, as we saw in what happened in Central Park, when a woman knew what her power was by simply being able to threaten a Black man who simply asked her to follow a rule. Just before we went on shelter in place, I was in the process of coordinating meetings with our Metro Transit officers or leadership and the chair, because we have received a number of complaints and videos, some taken by white women, where they felt like African American young men were treated unfairly by our officers. That all got put on the back burner, understandably, because of what happened shortly after. But I would offer that we have an obligation, like Councilmember Lindstrom shared, to ensure we're doing everything humanly possible to make sure we are ending the systematic overrepresentation of harm and discrimination in our own systems, which are well documented. We have to make sure that young Black boys are not seen first as a threat, but first as a young boy. with beautiful black skin. And not choked by our officers, not harassed by our officers, not treated as less than. I also would ask that as a council, and I realize this is getting in the weeds, but you consider your staff of color who are dealing with extreme implications of xenophobia right now, for your Asian staff, for your African American staff who are dealing with the onslaught of constant racial trauma, your Native staff, and that we're thinking about how are we making sure their pain is visible, particularly challenging time when we're working from home. There are many things that we can do and we should do. And one person's pain, another person's pain is not more or less. It's important for us to take action when injustice and disparities abound. And I agree with the chair that measurable action is required in this situation, and echo the call that we have a conversation with our Metro Transit leaders and chief about how we are rising above this practice with our own people and ensuring we're doing what we can and hopefully being present for our employees who are really in pain right now.
Thank you, Linnea. Judy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. I'm just letting it all soak in, and it's important. I just want to go back, when we hired the chief, it was really good, especially for so many of us who were new coming on to be part of that process. And I really wanted to get to know him more and understand, beyond the hiring process, his philosophies for our PD. And as was mentioned, with the large PD that we have, I was shocked organizationally that we didn't have a public safety committee or a greater connection with this council to our chief. In other organizations, that is the norm. But I understand it falls under transit because they're transit police. But it's bigger than that because they're out in the community doing work every day that we all know go beyond transit. They're doing heroic work with homeless people who are sheltering and on, the things. But I still think that I'm just one council member. I think that it needs to be elevated to have a closer relationship with council because there is such a big responsibility to community in that division. And culture is so important. And we at Met Council set that culture and have to carry through. And so I just want to put that out there. I also want to just say that, we talked earlier in management about negotiations coming up, and we've got the unions that we're working with. And I really hope that the unions, who I have great respect for, also put forward a culture that brings forward the best in their members, in serving humbly and honorably to the people that they are charged with caring for. And so I want to put that out there because there are many ways that our employees group and organize, and culture is found everywhere. And I want to make sure that we set expectations, high expectations for everybody in this community equally. And lastly, I just want to say this, and I'm trying to do my best as a council member, and I'm learning from other council members, but I'm going to keep on with this stuff is baked into everything that we do in every system we have. This is one, manifestation of hundreds of years, decades in the region of discriminatory practices that are still carrying forward. And I will just say this, the day and time we find ourselves in are not bringing out, as people have called, our better angels. And we're seeing horrible things taking place politically and otherwise. And we, as a regional body of government, go beyond that negativity. We bring people together, and we should rise above that. And I appreciate you got that. I just have to say, I appreciate serving with each and every one of you so much, because I know that's where we're coming from. So I'm just going to say this. I'm pissed off too. And I'm trying to figure out how on a daily basis do we keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, so that in the most insignificant policy that we have, we're checking to make sure that we are engaging and bringing to the table everybody who needs to be part of the conversation, so that we are transformative in this change. And as horrible as COVID is, and as horrible as all the stuff we're going through, there's always opportunity through great time of challenge and tragedy to finally say enough is enough. And so I hope this group, because we're young and we're united, can do our part in making the change that needs to be the change, so that everybody, you know, can be a citizen in this community and not be in fear of the most simplest things. It's not okay. So thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Did we miss anybody who wants to speak? We'll just say, having heard everybody, I'm kind of echo my deep appreciation for everybody here. It's such an important that we get at issues and our feelings and hard topics on top of the table. And I'm just so impressed with this council. I think we're going to be continuing to do some really important work. And I know, and we think about cultures, our good intentions doesn't change cultures, but leadership does. And when we think about the importance in this day and age to have humility and some empathy, and you've all kind of exhibited it here this afternoon, and it's really an honor to be with all of you. And I think that I will share that to the very kind and patient staff who are listening, because I just know that you really resonates with you as well, because I think that is a public commitment we have together. Unless anybody else has any comments, I will want to just say one little housekeeping thing is many of you noticed I just was spammed, and you're all getting emails from me asking you to probably send me money. You're certainly welcome to do that, but that did not come from me, so that is spam. Please ignore it. Liz has already reported it to IS, so thank you, those who maybe gotten that. Maybe somebody's listening in, they don't like what we're saying. Is a regional administrator, or I'll even say deputy administrator, have any comments?
None, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I see our general counsel. Anne, any words from you?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's been a very challenging meeting to listen for, and a lot of emotions, and I just really appreciate everyone's opinions, and I know staff really just want to do what we can to help make a difference in our region. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and thanks to all the staff and everybody. This is, I think, a really important conversation. It will continue. We're going to have more important in the depth of our roles becomes very poignant. Unless there's anything else, I would well, you know what? I don't think we need a motion unless there is any disagreement. I will